Welcome to Far Out with Faust. I'm Faust Chicho, and today I'm sitting here with David Brown. David is an earth guardian, a ceremonialist, a sound therapist, a world musician, and a recording artist. He's also an event producer with I Am Life, and that's a nonprofit organization dedicated to cultivating and connecting community through ceremony, music, and events. David spent the last 7 years of his life studying Native American wisdom traditions from North and South America, and he regularly collaborates on many projects to support, protect, and preserve these indigenous communities and their land and the ancient knowledge. David, thanks so much for coming on, man. It's appreciate you beaming in today. It's an honor to have you.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity to share. I'm grateful to be here.
Very cool, man. So I'm told by my buddies that you are a pretty amazing Kambo practitioner. Can you talk a little bit about that? What a lot of people don't have any idea what that is or what that means.
Sure. Yeah. So Kambo has a few different names. Kambo is one of the most commonly known names. It's also known as Sapo.
Sapo?
Akate. It is its scientific name in English is the giant waxy monkey tree frog. This is a beautiful form of medicine that comes from this frog. There are native traditions in both Peru and Brazil that have a very long history, could be hundreds, could be thousands of years, that some of these native traditions have been working with this particular medicine.
Mm-hmm.
The medicine comes from the skin that the frog actually secretes, and you apply it through the skin. You drink a lot of water, you go through a huge cleansing, and it's a purgative medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And it is known to help to treat things like depression, addiction, trauma. But before I get into all that, I might as well just share a little bit about some of the mythology and the cosmology from some of these native traditions.
Oh yeah, I would love that, man.
Yeah, that I've worked with and that I've studied with. So to start with, my main teachers are with the Matsis in Peru. There's also traditions in Brazil, as I mentioned, the Wanawa, the Huni Queen, and others that also work with this medicine. I'll start with the Matsis. I went down to Peru to study and work with them, and they gave me the blessing to share this medicine, which I should be careful calling it a medicine because
Oh yeah,
in the world of Western
medical censorship
and pharmaceuticals and all that, I should be careful how I refer to it. I do personally look at it as a medicine, but I don't think I can legally represent it as that. But I'm going to call it that because that's how I relate to it. So I just want to make that disclaimer.
Okay.
So the Matsis have a really beautiful story of this frog. When I was down there, they shared that they have an origin story of this frog, that amongst all of the creatures in the rainforest, it is the only creature that is neither a prey nor a predator. It is in this beautiful in-between category, kind of neutral, middle path. They say that it is the embodiment of the energies of fearlessness, protection, and courage. And in the forest, when I was down there one time actually on this training working with this medicine, and I was in a dieta, which I can elaborate on what that is later in our conversation. I saw a log bloom with mushrooms in the middle of the day, and then by that evening, mold was, eating those mushrooms, and they were gone by that night. And so, in one of the most biodiverse places on the planet, everything is kind of thriving off of everything. But the way they look at this medicine is that it is the one thing that is laughing among all the other creatures in the rainforest, because essentially it did not evolve to need to move very fast. It moves very slowly, almost like a sloth. And when it climbs, it just moves very slow. It's very peaceful. It's almost looks like it's moving in a Zen meditation. It's a gorgeous emerald green, quite large frog. And
that's why they call it the frog with no fear, right?
Essentially, yes.
That's awesome.
And then the Yuanawa have a beautiful origin story of this medicine. And again, we don't know for sure whether this was hundreds of years, thousands of years ago. It's really hard to say. Let's just say, a long ancient time ago, prior to them working with Kambo, The Iwanawa, they were experiencing some, as the story goes, they were experiencing some sort of illness around the community. Nothing that they typically worked with was assisting with, you know, the cleansing and the healing. And so their elder medicine person was fasting, drinking grandmother ayahuasca, and basically walked out into the pharmacy of the rainforest to seek some kind of a remedy, plant or otherwise. And so during that process, as the story goes, a celestial spirit came to this medicine person and gave the knowledge of how to work with this medicine of Kambo. It was so effective in helping the village and the community to get well that they have forever passed down this story, and they permanently relate to this being known as Kambo as a highly benevolent ally of humans whose mission on Mother Earth is to protect the guardians of the forest, the guardians of Mother Earth, the guardians of the sacred. And it was from them that I actually first heard, prior to actually studying and working with the medicine. Years ago, I had heard that they relate to this medicine as a natural vaccine. And that's also something I should be probably careful saying, so I'll just make a disclaimer. This is what I first heard from them. Once I actually deepened my study and I was working with a medically trained doctor who had one foot firmly planted in the medical world.
Right.
He's based out of Europe, and he also has one foot firmly planted in the shamanic traditions of the
Oh,
Amazon.
I love people like that.
Yeah, a total.
They're so
bridge.
rare, but man, they're phenomenal when they happen.
Totally. And he basically, you know, helped me understand and helped our group understand that, you know, the medicine of Kambo is considered to be one of the strongest anti-inflammatory medicines out there. It's also antiviral, antifungal, antiparasitic, antibacterial. Anti-cancerous properties have also been studied within one of the peptides within Kambo on studies with rats. You know, so we can't say it heals cancer, definitely cannot say that, but we know that one of the primary peptides within Kambo successfully treated cancerous tumors in rats. We also know that the medicine cleanses and flushes our lymphatic system. You know, whenever we get swollen glands, or, you know, our lymph system is throughout our whole body. And
it does what vaccines are supposed to do. Oh, I shouldn't say that either, but oh well.
Yeah, so when our lymphatic system is kind of, you could say it's like our body's drainage pathways for helping us to cleanse and remove toxins. So when that is flushed and clean, and there's other ways to flush the lymph system, that's just one of the many multidimensional qualities and properties of Kambo, but that's naturally increasing our immunity. It's also increasing our white blood cell count. You know, all these different things, we can start to have an understanding of how it is quite accurate, I feel, to relate to this medicine as though it is a vaccine.
I love that description of it, man. In fact, I actually thought the moment you started to talk about detoxification, you know, I started to think about, my mind went to vaccines and viruses, because we, you know, I mean, those of us who don't subscribe so religiously to the germ theory and that whole, you know, dog and pony show, you know, believe that viruses and bacteria are part of the natural, you know, system of the body, and that viruses, when we figure out they're doing something wrong, are actually detoxing the body of something as was intended, you know. But you know, it's fascinating that you said that, and that's where my mind went, and then you explained it. So cool.
Right on.
Yeah. I should just be honest and tell you that to celebrate Yom Kippur this morning, I was in Brooklyn with my buddy smoking DMT. So while everyone was atoning for their sins, we were blasting off into the atmosphere. It was great. But, you know, so I'm familiar with, I've sat in ceremony before, and I've, you know, I've done my share of psychedelics, but, you know, plant ceremony in Iowa is such a unique experience to each person. Is there some traits that go with Kambo that, you know, are totally different than that, or like, what's the effects?
Totally, yeah. So Kambo is not a visionary entheogen, and I use the word entheogen as opposed to the word psychedelic, because there's limitations, the connotations associated with the term psychedelic. I do prefer the word entheogen when I'm referring to a medicine such as ayahuasca or many other similar visionary plant medicines and plant teachers. Entheo meaning God or the divine, and gen to generate, so to generate an experience within oneself of the divine, of God, directly, direct experience, direct communion with the creator or God or higher consciousness. So Kambo is not by the Matsis. They do not work with the grandmother tea, but the Brazilian traditions that I spoke of earlier, they do. And this Kambo is very compatible, very complementary and synergistic to the work of the grandmother tea. So, you know, there's been a lot of studies that have come out over the years, thanks to MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association to Psychedelic Studies, as well as others, you know, documenting the ways in which the grandmother tea are very helpful with things like depression, addiction, trauma, but it's working from its own angle and its own perspective. Whereas Kambo, it's not a visionary medicine, but it also is working towards healing depression, addiction, and trauma, just to name a few things. I mean, I have quite a few case studies of other things that I've witnessed, other, I would say, miracles that I've seen happen as a result of my work with Kambo.
Oh, that's awesome. We'll ask you about those.
Yeah,
talk a little bit about those before the end.
Yeah, well, aside from the few that I just mentioned, people have experienced long-term relief from chronic pain issues. One of the peptides in Kambo is 40 times stronger than morphine. And there is a potential that it could be developed into a non-addictive chronic pain medication due to the fact that it doesn't have a possibility of addiction in where it's binding within the neurochemistry of the brain. So that's one thing. People have had a lot of support with things like diabetes, things like Lyme's disease, blood circulation issues, tendinitis, carpal tunnel, fertility. You know, Kambo is Kambo is working on the reproductive system, both for men and women. It's not just to one gender or the other. You know, and that's what I mentioned by case studies, just referring to my own direct experience of working with medicine. I have treated 2 different women who were around 39, 40 years of age, and both of them had been in a process of, you know, attempting to conceive with their partner. I think each of them for well over a year and not having success. And I had put out an article that I had seen, which I can link to you if you want it at a later time, that was saying how this medicine can help with fertility. And once I sent that out, you know, eventually these 2 women came to me over the course of the next couple of years, and without fail, both of them, after 3 treatments of this medicine, within about a month or 2 of completing that treatment cycle of 3 sessions, 3 rounds with the medicine of Kambo, were able to conceive, and they've actually given birth already. And
that's extraordinary, man. I don't think many people are aware that there's, you know, a connection there. That's incredible. That's so cool, man. That's like, I mean, you gave them a great gift, and you had the foresight and the intuition to send that letter out, and they saw it. I mean, you know, you really understand how everything is meant to be when you hear a story like that. At least I do, you know. So that's so cool, David.
Oh yeah, I heard from the second woman, like she called me while I was in Guatemala last November, December, and she's like, hey, do you have time to talk? And I said, sure. And she called me and she's like, hey, I'm 4 weeks away from giving birth, and I just wanted to tell you, I was guided to tell you just all kinds of thank yous and gratitudes. And she's like, I really feel this was one of the main things that helped this to happen.
Yeah.
You know, so that's, I mean, you know,
that's so cool, man.
In terms of why, we can get into my story maybe at some point of how I even got to be on this journey and how I got to be resonating with these medicines and these traditions and this path. But, you know, that's the intrinsically fulfilling, self-sustaining energy as to why I even want to devote any amount of my energy, which I have devoted my life energy into, you know, learning and sharing these medicines and these traditions with integrity and with respect in the best way that I can.
Yeah. Well, you seem to be affecting lives in the process. So imagine you're on the right calling. That's it's amazing. Wanted to ask you
Mhm.
about the bird tribe.
Our world goes through a golden age every great year, which is about a 24 to 26,000 year cycle. And
Mhm.
so within that great year, there's inevitably going to be a golden age all the way down to the dark ages and back up
Mhm.
again over the course of a 26,000 year cycle. So the last time that we had that fall, that descent from whatever previous golden ages that there were, I mean,
Mhm.
people talk about Atlantis, people talk about Lemuria.
Yeah,
You know, there's a lot of ancient structures all over the world that
and underwater too that we haven't even found yet. But yeah.
and in the oceans, yeah, that indicate that
Mhm.
there were very advanced civilizations that probably had the ability to travel the globe. So
Mhm.
sometime since then, we descended cyclically as we do. And during that time, humans became over-identified with the world of form, with
Yeah.
ego. The ego does not run the show, but we started to forget that the ego is a great servant to the
Mhm.
spirit. And we started to think that the ego is running the show. And so we became very over-identified with lower vibrations like fear, jealousy,
Mhm.
hatred, aversion, all kinds of things that lead to greater
Shiny
suffering.
objects, technology. I mean, not. I mean, the kind of technology that we're using right now, but also, things that serve as a just another way to be addicted to escapism. To escape your life. That's where technology, I think, runs us into trouble. But yeah, I think it was all there. I think it was all there, and it still is somewhere. I think there's places we haven't discovered where some of the evidence of this is really fully intact, and there's other places where there's pieces, and we find pieces here and there, and then we write them off, or we, I always love Greg Braden talks about all the objects that he'll go and study that are out of time. They're obviously 40,000-year-old gear that they found, and I'm like, wait a minute, why is there a cog from a machine from 40,000 years ago? How do you explain that? How do you write that off? But of course we do that really well. We write things off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So during that period of time of forgetting our connection to higher consciousness, as the story goes, the bird tribes literally could not um, resonate in this world of form, and so they left. Our higher consciousness left, but there was always an understanding that they would return at a particular time, and so that time is now essentially.
Hmm.
We're going through huge awakenings and growing pains as we're midwifing into a different level of kind of
I
collective.
love how you put that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, as we're kind of
Labor
going through
pains.
a global initiation into higher consciousness. It's like we're on a global vision quest, or it's like
Yeah.
we're all in the chrysalis together. I mean, especially this year of quarantine and everything that's going on with COVID and all of that. I do see us all like we're in this kind of chrysalis,
Yeah.
and we're slowly, at that time, the imaginal cells come online and they activate when enough of them. At first, they're attacked by the main. So when let me
Yeah. We're seeing a
rewind.
lot of that now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Ah.
So when a caterpillar goes in a chrysalis state, as its old structures begin to decay, the imaginal cells come online. And at first, they are attacked by the rest of the organism. And then when enough of them connect, they actually inject a whole new blueprint into the genetic directory of the organism.
Hmm.
And out of the old decaying soup of the old organism, they start to create a whole different organism with wings that can fly.
Hmm.
And I don't know what stage collectively we're at in that whole process, but the end result is we're going to be a completely transformed, metamorphosized global culture. And I
Yeah.
guess you could say that when that happens, that would be the full embodiment of the return of the bird tribes.
Yeah.
Ken Carey, the author of that book, says that it's in this lifetime that the bird tribes have the ability to become fully incarnated in the world of form, in our actual temple physical bodies. So it's
Wow.
really about embodying higher consciousness in this realm and
Hmm.
utilizing that awareness in expression and embodiment of all of the deepest wisdom, traditions, and values, compassion, service to others, always, on the
Absolutely.
path of self-mastery, and, becoming aware of how we relate to Mother Earth, how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to one another, and moving towards sustainability.
Yeah.
So,
And this is what I'm, my children are 6 and 9, and my 9-year-old is, I mean, he's pretty amazing in his understanding and his intuition and sensitivity, but he gets caught up on the whole superhero thing, and then
oh, yeah.
he starts to mix that with, everything I teach him about spirituality and the dimensions and the celestial ancestors of ours. And he's like, so when am I going to get my superpowers? And I'm like, you mean like you want to fly around and have like skin that doesn't get hurt and all that? And he's like, yeah. He's like, so like, what do I have to do? And I was like, well, you have to start being really compassionate to your little brother is what you have to do. I was like, you got to really start practicing, man. And he looked at me and I'm like, I'm serious. Unconditional love and compassion are the first steps that you take to your superpowers, to all your gifts that you have to unlock, and he just looked at me like, yeah, I know I need to get back on that. But I teach my kids that too. And I believe that. Absolutely, man.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
cool.
And how that all relates to the prophecy of the eagle and the condor, so very much related to that. The eagle, the bird, represents the nations, the Western world. It represents the technological worldview, the
United States.
the masculine, the mind. The condor represents the indigenous worldview and cosmovision. It represents the heart, it represents the feminine. And so within that book and other, versions and expressions of this prophecy, there was an awareness among Native nations in all over the world, and definitely specifically within the Americas, North, Central, and South. There was a coming time when there was actually going to be an almost full destruction of the nations of the condor as a result of the imbalance, and the nations of the eagle would be the ones doing that. But then after a 500-year period would come the time where the condor and the eagle could fly together again. And so that is about the harmony of the contemporary modern worldview with these native traditions and worldviews. It's about the merging of science and spirituality. It's about the harmony and the balance of duality, of masculine and feminine, mind and heart. And so the idea is that we cannot move forward into the next expression, the return of the bird tribes, emerging from the chrysalis, creating a sustainable global culture, until, like, we cannot do that with just the modern contemporary industrial technological worldview alone. We cannot do that from just the traditional indigenous worldviews alone either, but there's got to be somewhere where science and spirituality meet together that allows that new world to take place. So
I mean, and I believe you're seeing it happen. It's being rolled out, and as much as people want to dismiss some of it as woo-woo, then when the scientists come and say, yeah, but look at this, here's your woo-woo under a microscope. I love that. I love when that happens, because it's a new perspective for people. And it's true, like when science catches up with spirituality and the two blend, I really think that's when you'll really start to see our wings sprout. I believe that. I believe it right across the board, as far as our understanding of medicine, science, physics, you name it, communication. That's so cool, man. I love that. The lore of the eagle and the condor, it's so powerful, and there's so much symbolism in it, and that's, going on and kind of having it out right now, I think, in a lot of ways. I think you could find a lot of parallels with some of the conflicts happening in society today and culture today, as far as who's right, who's wrong, who should be canceled, who should be, awarded. Censorship is, the fact that we have to make a disclaimer before you use the word medicine or vaccines. It's like, I mean, there's something disturbing about that, in my opinion. And everybody thinks they have it right. You know, everyone's like, well, there should be some censorship, and there should, or everyone thinks they have the best way forward, but no one wants to talk about it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you're bringing this up. Yeah. So you bring up cancel culture, which relates to, you know, the politically correct atmosphere that gives people a reason to become offended when they hear something different, you know, associated with this year and this whole global lockdown whole thing that's been unfolding. You know, I'm gonna not share my personal views on the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of people though are saying that yeah, the virus is real, but to what extent has the hysteria and the infringements of rights based on that hysteria and based on fear, to what extent has that been manufactured?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I try my best to share my views as my views, and not to share things that are just my opinions and my views as some ultimate truth. But early on this year, you know, I had expressed some views that
you and me both, brother. You and me both. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Keep going.
Yeah, no, I had expressed some views that I literally said, here's some of my thoughts, my comments, my views. And, you know, I had a whole bunch of, I feel like I got canceled, and even to some extent people tried to deplatform me on some level, due to, and these are, you know, close relatives, who simply because they lost the ability to agree to disagree. There is an over-identification with one's beliefs such that when encountering different beliefs, the fight or flight thing happens, judgment happens. There's a lot of different things that happen that lead to cancel culture. And what I've experienced is one tiny little thing that is happening all over the world right now with anyone who shares a view that goes against, I guess, the mainstream. The mainstream narrative seems to want to censor. It seems to want to cancel things. It seems to want to react to emotions, but not to facts. Right. So I'm gonna not go into any specific details here, but when I went through that, it was a challenging moment for me to sit with my own emotions. Like, okay, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling rejected, like, et cetera, but it's been a really powerful teaching. I'm so grateful for what I've gone through, and I don't hold anyone, I don't judge anyone, I don't make anybody wrong for the choices they've made, because I have compassion that people are all doing the best they can given the crazy ness of this year and the lack of access to, there's all this information. How do we sift through? How do we critically think? And I know that a lot of people are in a lot of fear, and I know that we're all doing the best that we can. So even if a dear relative is canceling me and telling me that they don't want to work with me anymore, it's like I'm learning. I have a long way to go to master it, but I'm learning that there is a way to dance with everyone. To dance with the illusion and to dance with stories. It's like, it's not my responsibility to correct someone's illusions about what they think that I believe about something. So in other words, from that place of compassion, I can see where people are at. I can love them just the same. I don't need to defend myself. I don't need to do any of that. But there's two concepts related to this: the Maya and the Leela. So I don't know exactly which tradition in the East that these come from, whether that's the Vedas or I'm not exactly sure. But the Maya refers to the illusion of life when it has you. So essentially, you know, you're going through something and you're over-identified with it and you get lost in it. It's like you were surfing the wave and it closed out on you and you're caught under. But the Leela is when you're essentially dancing within the illusions of the world, but you're aware of that. You're the observer, you're the witness, and you're not fully identified with it.
You are
And
describing my DMT trip this morning to the T, over and over, dude. I mean, I think it may be the exact words I used to talk about what I just experienced when I was talking to my friend afterwards. I mean, no shit, I swear. It's crazy. It's like, if I'm red-faced, that's why.
nice.
So cool.
Yeah, and so the Leela, it's like you're capable of, if you're fully embodied in the Leela, it's like, yes, human emotions and human suffering and pain, they're all experienced as real. And so to that regard, and this is going to sound paradoxical, but what highest truth is not paradoxical? To that regard, they are real. But in the grand scheme of things, when you see, from this, you see through the cosmic joke of it all, there is a possibility that even in the midst of this year and the craziness of it all, that there can be available to you, again, almost paradoxically, like divine cosmic bliss.
Absolutely.
And so there is a way of, like, when you're encountering that, it's like, it doesn't take you out of your center, but you're able to maintain the love, maintain the compassion, maintain the middle path, not react to reaction, not react to judgment with more judgment, but just practice unconditional love, practice accepting and allowing. And again, I'm definitely not perfect at that. I'm a human learning each day is the best that I can, just like all of us. But it has been a huge gift from this experience, and it's also helped me to, like, center more deeply in my center. What are my values? What is it that I care about? And not to give my energy away, my power away to things that I actually don't need to, that are in that story, in that narrative of illusion.
I still struggle with that a little bit, although I've gotten a lot better with it. Because I had a similar experience, like the moment I started to share my thoughts about some of the world events that were happening, and more so the reaction to what was happening. I found that a lot of my peers and people who I thought I saw eye to eye with, and in fact did see eye to eye with the day before, no longer saw eye to eye with. And, accusations fly, and people start to question your mental health, which I'm fine with. I don't mind that at all. I think it's funny when people are like, are you losing your mind? And I'm like, I hope so. I sure hope so. Because there's only one place I can fall, and that's right here in my heart, so, and if you can even just start from there and realize that, you can't take away someone's truth. It's as unique to them as yours is to you. And it's all valid. You can have a truth, and it doesn't make their truth, invalid or invalid. Like, it's the biggest thing I think people are in trouble with, is like, people think that they can't be right if someone else is, or vice versa. And it doesn't, there's so many truths. There's, you can just look at the way we're throwing around facts these days. Look at the way people one side takes one fact and says, see, told you, while the other side is doing the exact same thing with the exact same fact. I mean, if that doesn't tell you that there's a multi-dimensional perspective of things that we call facts, I don't know what does. I mean, you're seeing it played out everywhere right now. It's crazy.
My intention has always been to be on the middle path and to welcome all views. And also, the cancel culture thing is interesting because it shuts down the capacity for conversation. So it shuts down prematurely the ability to even dialogue and to even find where maybe do we have more resonance, and where do we have more harmony in our views than what we're already imagining and reacting before we've even had the ability to communicate.
It's sad to me that you even have to preface it like that, and we should be able to share our thoughts. We should be able to share our opinions without this, knowing that we may be judged and punished.
Or when there was people, debating from completely opposite sides, it's like that is how we become informed. That's how I think critically. It's like, if I've mostly been exposed to this side, then I need to see that side.
That's right.
Before I can even speak what my view is, not necessarily even what I think the truth is, but just You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, man.
I also wanted to mention this concept of rigid and fluid identity structures. So early on in my journey, I started to understand I had some rigidity in my identity structures. You know, when I first started working with the grandmother tea, you know, the first few things that the medicine had me look at was healing my relationship to my maternal and my paternal lineage. You know, starting with my relationship with my mom and my father, and that has since led to a lot of healing in my family, going back to their parents, and you know, who knows how far back, but you know, we know that we can epigenetically, to quote Joe Taffer, who's another one of those bridges between the medical world and the shamanic traditions of the traditional Amazonian plant medicine, we can epigenetically reprogram our DNA and our genes. So when we experience trauma, we have what he calls a maladaptive stress response at the level of the expression of the genes. And so we alter the expression of our genes through trauma. We also know that that can carry on from generation to generation. So I'm also aware that at this time, when the world has access to so many different avenues and pathways to healing, that that we have that ability, and in this case, the grandmother tea, to alter the expression of those traumas.
Yeah. And it reminds me of what Dr. Joe Dispenza always talks about, who one of my first teachers kind of taught me how to meditate, you know, and I love putting him on because his teachings are always a reminder of how, even though we once thought we were the victim of and subject to our genes, you know, and Bruce Lipton does a wonderful job of writing and teaching this as well, you know, we're not, you know, we are not subject to our genes. Our genes are expressing in regards to who we are, you know, and that doesn't matter what gene you're talking about. And science is really catching up to this, really starting to, and I think it's a big question of getting the medical community and some of the modern day thinking about medicine to catch up to it, because I mean, it makes a lot of treatments free. So it's, you know, we know what happens when things like that come around. They kind of get propagandized to be fraudulent, and, you know, they tuck them away and hide these concepts away because it would cost them big time.
Yeah, and I think that circling back to the rigid identity structures and fluid identity structures conversation, that a lot of what we were mentioning that's been unfolding this year, when somebody has a rigid identity structure, I think that they are over-identified with a particular narrative, a particular idea, a particular worldview. They're grasping and they're clutching, they're holding on.
Clutching.
They're unable to adjust the sail to the wind, and they're just laser focused. And I think that comes from fear of death.
Yeah.
I think that comes from the inability, obviously easier said than done, to embrace uncertainty. That's the only thing you can do.
Yeah, it's huge.
When you're unknown, when you're in the chrysalis, you're like, oh my God, I'm dying, but really you're going through a rebirth. You're going through a metamorphosis. Yeah. And if you can, at that moment, and we're all at there in different and similar moments, if you can learn to embrace the uncertainty, I think it is possible to move in the direction of having fluid identity structures. I think what that allows us to do, that's what allows like playfulness, being silly, not taking yourself too seriously, being able to laugh at the cosmic joke of everything.
That's right.
And through empathy. I just watched Thrive 2.
Somebody just recommended that on one of my Facebook posts.
Holy smokes. All I can say is
I didn't see Thrive 1 though. I should watch Thrive 1 first, right?
You should definitely watch Thrive 1. Thrive 1 is called Thrive, What Is It Going to Take, I believe, or What Will It Take? And the second one just came out this last week, and it's called Thrive 2, This Is What It Takes. And they actually do cover the history of how things have been covered up when an advancement was made in medicine. You know, somebody who was healing cancer, and then they got character assassinated by big pharma and
held up in court. I mean, character assassinated. Their work gets bought. Their work gets buried. You know, since I've gotten into this, and not just this podcast, but since I got into this work and since this pandemic hit, and I really started to be vocal about sovereignty, you know, and how
Mm,
powerful we are as creators, and how powerful our immune system is because it's ours. And it's funny, you know, a friend sent me this old documentary about this. He's an Israeli doctor who really started to have some amazing progress curing cancer with urine treatment. And he was doing these crazy things with the urine, and the results he was getting were astounding. You would never believe it. But like, you know, you could tell that to anyone. And today, you would, I mean, like, you know, you would be laughed out, and they would attack you. They would smear you. You would end up your own meme, you know, you'd be the P, you know, go, why would I get real cancer treatment when I could get P treatment? You know, like you see them doing this to people. And I'm just like, you don't know what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know if you're right or not. And what if you're wrong? You know, you're not giving anyone the benefit of the doubt. You know, one of the doctors who's been really outspoken, and then I found out that he was treating people for cancer with urine treatment. And Dr. Batar, who's been very outspoken and kind of come into a national spotlight
yeah,
with what he's been saying.
I resonate with Dr. Guitar.
Yeah, and I found out that one of the ways he was treating people in his clinic was with his urine treatment. And I was like, well, son of a bitch, isn't that amazing? You know, coincidence if you believe in those things, but.
Yeah, that was part of the beginning of my process this year, being exposed to Dr. Buttar, being exposed to different documentaries that have all been censored. Like, I would send a video to like a friend, and then they would pull it up a day later, and it was gone. And it was like, because it had like 20+ million views, and it was calling out,
yeah,
you know, inconsistencies or falsehoods within the mainstream narrative at the level of all these different health and medical professionals. And then they would get character assassinated.
And the machine would go into effect. And I'm like, doesn't anyone else see that all these articles say the same thing? I mean, the headlines are a little different, but the articles are almost identical, every single one, right down the line. And I'm like saying this, I'm like, and if you study the work, then you can go through and be like, but that's not true. Why would they say that when that's not true? You know, and then every article parrots it.
You know, from my perspective, what's unfolding right now is we're kind of in an information war, and there's kind of there's probably infinite timelines being fought over. And I'm not going to go into detail about what those exactly are, but I don't have the full grasp and understanding to be able to do so. But the idea of censorship, you know, when all these things started happening, that was one of the main things that was triggering me to pay more attention. It's like, all of these things are being censored. Oh, Brian Rose from the London Reel, he created the Digital Freedom Platform to protect and he's calling upon all these major nations to sign this permanent agreement that we will have our rights protected, and that it doesn't matter if some of these big tech companies are private or whatever they are, right. They still have a right to protect our information and our right to free speech. Because when I think about the future generations in the world, which I often do, you know, the idea that every thought, word, and action is affecting 7 generations forward, the life that they're going to get to have. Are they going to be born into a world 7 generations from now where there is access to clean air and healthy food?
Yeah.
And you know, if censorship continues in the current trend, I have faith that it will be addressed, and that we're in a process.
Yeah.
So I have faith and I trust that that's the timeline. That's the energy that I'm putting out there, and that's the prayer that I'm holding.
Yeah.
But if we were to do nothing, if we were to just consent to all of these infringements of our rights, censorship being one of the big ones for me, then what kind of Orwellian world would we go into worse than what we've already seen unfold in the short time span of a year?
Further down to go back up. I mean, you know, I believe we're gonna find our way back up. You know, I was thinking of some of the legend and lore of how dark and like the Orion Belt and some of the planets and some of the duality and polarity that went on in some of the Orion Wars, and how, you know, how rough they had it, some of the beings there. And, you know, but eventually, you know, evolution only goes one way.
Love always wins.
That's right. David, have you ever seen they're often referred to as machine elves or ETs in session, or and if you have, what was your impression? What did you think they were? Where do you think they're
Oh,
from?
oh man, this is one of my favorite topics of conversation. And
Yes.
I uh, I don't, I have not yet taken any steps towards writing a book, but I will say when I write a book, it's going to be about this topic of conversation. And I did get a chance to ask Graham Hancock. We hosted him, I Am Life did last year, and this was actually the thing that I asked him about. Um, and I'm going to circle it back to the bird tribes, and the Winyapai, the celestial immortals, is another, or prior to me meeting these beings through the grandmother tea, it was about 3 years into my journey with the grandmother tea that I actually met them through grandmother. But if the first time I met these beings was through smoking DMT.
Mm.
I didn't know what to call them at that time, so I called them the DMT allies. And all I could recover from each of these experiences, that there was certain consistent characteristics of my encounters with these beings. And I also had already read, back years prior, I had read Rick Strassman's book, DMT, the Spirit Molecule. I was already aware that
Great book. I love that book. Yeah.
that some 90% of the people in his studies reported having a communion with some higher consciousness,
Yeah.
or extraterrestrials, or however their worldview saw it, angels, bird tribes, God, whatever, all of that. And so the main characteristics of these beings, which at that time I called the DMT allies, was that there was a sense of communing with the higher consciousness. There was a holographic visionary state, not like I'm seeing visions in front of me, but like I'm in
Yeah.
a whole other.
It's full three-dimensional kaleidoscope. Everything. It's
Yeah,
all encompassing. All encompassing. It's not like a movie screen. You're not watching it. You're literally in it, and you are it.
yeah. And before you can even consciously think of a question, or before you can consciously become aware of the question you're asking, this being is already showing you the answer through some kind of a telepathic connection, through a combination of visions, feelings, sounds. There's auditory frequencies
Yeah.
happening. There's usually a sense of deep trust and deep peace, because your ego could just as easily be losing it, because you're in this whole other, like, one time, the first time I encountered these beings was in a ceremony around a fire, and when I opened my eyes, I actually had forgotten that I was there around a fire in ceremony, because I was in a whole other place. But typically there's a space of heart coherence that is needed to attune to that frequency, because just because you drink the medicine or you work
Smoke
with
the DMT. Yeah.
does not necessarily mean you know how to attune to that particular station.
That's
a
right.
lot of people talk about this, that we are simply cosmic antenna, and that if this multidimensional connection to all of creation is our birthright, then this is something we all have the potential to learn. And I feel like each of these experiences with, I'm just going to call them the Winyapai, again, celestial immortals. You call them machine elves, but I'm just going to call them the Winyapai. Every time I can connect with them, it feels like the most sacred experience that I've been longing for my entire life. It feels like I am reconnecting with higher consciousness that I have been grieving my whole life, that I was born into a dense matrix.
You had no idea you were missing them that much, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's typically a space of heart coherence that you have to be in, a space of stillness in the mind, stillness in the body. If you're being busy in your body and in your thoughts, those opportunities may come, but you may not even notice them, and then they pass and they're gone, and the channel's not there. But there's usually a sense that you're communing with a very benevolent consciousness that exists in a different realm of space-time, let's say fifth dimension or beyond, that for them, they can become aware of humans simply by looking, and they can just become aware of us. But for us, it's through these experiences that we're actually capable of expanding our range of frequencies, and then even enough to tune to that frequency. There's often more characteristics of these experiences is that you feel like you're getting a psychic surgery. I know in the
Yeah.
Santo Daime, which is an ayahuasca church and religion originating from Brazil, they call these beings the daime surgeons.
Time surgeons.
Sometimes they have humanoid bodies, sometimes they have insectoid-like bodies. And I
Yeah.
really am beginning to feel that most people who have had experiences of so-called abduction was probably in the DMT realm of their sleep,
Yeah.
where they literally opened up that connection while they were in their bed. Because when we dream, our
Yeah.
dreams are experienced as real as our real life
That's right.
experience when we're awake. And so who's to say one is real, one is not? They're just different planes of consciousness that we're tapping into. And the last thing I'll share on that, I have a whole book I want to write on it. But the last thing I'll share on that is I think that because each time I have these experiences, my overwhelmingly consistent question to these beings is, how do I maintain this connection? How do I support
Yeah.
the embodiment? How do I anchor this frequency into life forever? Like, how do I do that? And they basically said that these are training wheels. These moments, they're literally giving us software and hardware updates. I know
I got such a sense of that this morning, man. Like I was like literally asking the same question, and it was just kept showing me that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. You know, that's what we're doing. But what do you? And I'm like, okay, you're right. I know. I knew that. But can I take it all with me though? I want to take it all with me. You know. And they're like, you have to trust that you're taking everything with you that you can, and you are.
You know, I think that these experiences are reminders. I think it's one of the things that is most needed in the world, is for people to be able to have, for it to be within our culture, that we actually have safe opportunities where we can have education, where we can have the opportunity to commune with the Godhead that is within each and every single man and woman and child on this planet. And I think that if enough people had that, there would be, you know, a great healing overnight.
If you could leave one teaching, one mantra, you know, to humanity, and you were transitioning on or leaving, that you feel, and you could really reach everyone. You could reach everyone to get them to understand something, or at least try to. What would you give to them? What would you tell them that you believe would help them?
I would say to always follow your heart, always stay true, celebrate and protect your authenticity, be who you are. And it's important that we maintain our relationship and our connection with the traditions that will help us maintain our relationship with Mother Earth. You know, walking in beauty with Mother Earth, walking in harmony in our relationship with Mother Earth is not something that the Western culture has helped us with. Learning how to protect Mother Earth, learning that every single thought, every choice, every action you make matters and has a ripple and an impact on all of life on this planet. So each and every person and each and every thought and feeling and experience that each person has matters.
That's right.
And also remembering that we are all coming from the same source. We all come from the same mother. We are the human race. We are all the
human
same
family. Yeah.
We are all on this journey together. We're all on the same ship. We're all going, doesn't matter what level of economic privilege or it doesn't matter in what circumstances you're born. Everyone experiences pain. Everyone experiences trauma. Everyone experiences joy and laughter. You know, music is the universal language. You know, seek more for our commonality and just work towards holding that compassion that we're all in this together, y'all. And we gotta realize that. We gotta come together, and we gotta start to anchor that embodied awareness at the level of our communities, and eventually our states and nations, and eventually the world. And who knows what's gonna happen once that happens. But I feel that we're in this kind of global test. It's like, if we can not destroy ourselves, maybe we will access that next stage of our collective birthright of becoming an interstellar, interplanetary civilization. And we will see things change rapidly. But we're still dealing with the end of a dying age that is based on a lot of control and manipulation. And so if we can have that grander cosmovision of understanding that we are at this threshold moment. We can simultaneously hold space for the dying of the old organism, and we have to recognize that and see that. We have to see the things that are being illuminated that are hard to look at, that we want to turn away from because, oh my gosh, that's scary, or I can't believe that's going on, or, you know, and simultaneously we can work on anchoring these new codes that eventually become the blueprint for this new organism of humanity. So
the wings, that's right. The wings.
That inspiration is what, if I was having a conversation with a child or my child, I would probably come from that lens, you know.
It's a great lens to come from. It's been an honor to talk to you, David. I have a feeling one day we're going to meet in person. I'm hoping to join you one day. Certainly sit with you. I think that'd be amazing. And you know, I understand, and I have a lot of. I'm sorry that you've been, you know, experiencing some of the negative cultural phenomenon these days. But you know, hang in there, man. You're doing great work. It's been great talking to you. And you know, I'm gonna have to have you back on the show in about a year so we can talk about the crazy shit that was happening while we were having this podcast, you know.
Oh, thank you, Faust. And just, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to, you know, speak with you, to share my connection with Kambo, and, you know, just to have an opportunity to just be in dialogue and counsel and kind of like integrate a lot of what's going on, and have a, you know, a larger view to help us understand what's going on. So thank you for inviting me on, and I look forward to getting to meet you when the time comes as well.
David, before you go, man, Hunter was telling me what a phenomenal musician you are. I was wondering if you could play something for everyone listening.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, man. Wow. I was somewhere else for the last 3 minutes of that. My God, that was awesome. Thank you so much.
Mm.
Take care, David. Thank you again.
Thank you, family.
You're the man.
Appreciate you.